on the Alliance of Sahel States. Of course, we are trying to see a bloc that is challenging modern day imperialism. Ladies and gentlemen, it is often said that knowledge is freedom. Yes, of course, it is this knowledge that gave the impetus to the leaders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso to set a new trajectory for the African continent in an ever-evolving world. For over 2 years, the three revolutionary leaders have glowed toward one vision and mission to see the total liberation of the African continent, and of course having the sovereignty of its states. Sustainable sovereignty that comes with a price, of course, heightened in what we can also term as geopolitics of resistance, which is actually seen in the sphere of influence battle that is happening across the Sahel states since the beginning of the practical phase of the revolution, bringing the new, dimension of the call for sovereignty across the Sahelian states, championed by the leaders, of course. And we can see that this resistance is also manifested in what the leadership of Burkina Faso actually characterized as the Black Winter, and which is acclaimed by other leaders or stakeholders across the African continent. So for decades, ladies and gentlemen, the resource-rich Sahel region has suffered untold insecurity through a NATO-backed operations. Amidst these challenges, however, the alliance has actually championed a new trajectory, of course, sending out the former colonial powers and, of course, of forces that have occupied the country or the region over the decades, yet there is no end in sight to insecurity. But then, since the dawn of time and now after independence, this insecurity has persisted, but a new trajectory has opened for these key nations, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, as they today stand as a new power bloc, challenging and shaking the foundations of some 60 years of French colonial dominance. It should be noted, ladies and gentlemen, that the revolution has been hailed not just across the African continent, but beyond, with, of course, the Center for Political Innovation, a US-based group calling for the total liberation of the African continent from globalist gimmicks and imperialism, and of course, with the slogan, Hands of Africa. So, ladies and gentlemen, together with a panel of experts, we are going to get into the insights of the revolution happening in the Sahel region, how this can transcend to changing the geopolitical setting of the West African sub-region, and why not the African continent as a whole at the time of major global transformations. I will join you right after the jingle. Just tuning in, this is Global Insight, brought to you by Globers. So without much ado, let's take straight we are to welcome Dr. Mba Ukweni Andy, a geopolitics and strategic studies expert, joining us from the United Kingdom to, of course, give meaningful insights to our topic of today, seeing the Sahelian states as that giant bloc standing to challenge imperialism in modern day or contemporary Africa. It's a pleasure having you, Dr. Andy.
Thank you, Clarisse. We look forward to a really interesting conversation today.
Of course, thank you for making it count this moment. And to the United States of America, let's welcome Caleb Maupin, author, journalist, and of course, political analyst. It's a pleasure having you again on this edition of Global Insight, noting that you actually represent the Center for Political Innovation, and we are looking at how important the African cause is to your organization and elsewhere across the globe.
Sure. Pleasure to be here as always.
Looking forward to having constructive discussions as always. And for the first time on this platform, let's welcome Penny Arcos, who is actually author and of course Minnesota team captain of the Center for Political Innovation. Great to have you this day, Penny.
There we go. Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate the welcome.
Thank you so much. Of course, you've written lots of books there, and of course, one focuses on Africa, Africa's flame, the rise of Ibrahim Traore, and it is good to know that the African Revolution is not only localized within the continent, it is gaining momentum and of course having voices from the global sphere. It is indeed time for the continent. We stay in the U.S. with Noah Schenk, activist, journalist, and political commentator. Happy to have you on this edition of Global Insight.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. I greatly appreciate it.
Looking forward to having an insightful conversation. Alto Mobley, who is also a journalist, historian, is joining us still from the United States of America. And it is, of course, I know, a timely topic for you, Mr. Author, as we continue to look at the strength of the Sahelian states in actually, bringing a new face of the African continent that talks of a sustainable sovereignty. You're welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Clarisse, and looking forward to a great discussion today as well.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Just to let you know that subsequently we'll be joined by Professor Gabila Nubong, researcher, political economist, and also an expert in international relations. We're just going to go as it is often a tradition on the platform of the knowledge sharing platform of Global Insight to first of all have holistic interpretations of our topic for discussion, and a center focuses on the Sahelian states, and of course looking at it to be that giant bloc standing to conquer or counter imperialism at this juncture. We start off with you, Dr. Andy, of course, having some sort of analysis in your own perspective for over 2 years. How do you think this is shaping the geopolitical dynamics of the West African sub-region and even the African continent amidst changing global trends and shifting alliances?
Okay, thank you very much, Clarisse. We see a change, a regional change in Africa, structurally speaking, that offers a departure from the traditional style of imperialistic governments extended beyond borders to control government, control administration, resources, and people in other climes, territorially speaking. And in the wake of the Alliance of Sahel States, we see the emergence of a new bloc explicitly challenging the Western imperialism, which structurally is a kind of three-state confederation consisting Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Right. Initially, it was supposed to be like a defense pact following series of military coups and all that. However, structural issues have confronted the formation of that three-state arrangement. Now we're talking about the post-confederation realities, talking about the new realities. If you have been able to come up with a confederation style of multilateral security architecture that offers a measure of balance, a measure of security to reduce possible vulnerabilities, right? What then has become the new style of managing politics? What is the place of human rights? Is human right guaranteed? What is the situation of security vacuum with respect to leadership? Is there a democracy that is going to transition effectively to guarantee governance, smooth governance within a specified, well-defined period? Is there sort of imperial realignment, right, that replaces, for example, France with another global force that is going to recycle what seemed like we or the Sahel state is trying to displace? And then there is also issues of economic isolation. So if the Sahel state, for example, has imagined itself as a new political entity, what does that mean? It means it has simply redefined itself. It has simply reasserted itself to say that, look, thus far have we come, and no more shall we go on this track. We want to be known for this. We want to redefine what leadership is for our people. We want to redefine what citizenry means for our people. We want to redefine what economic independence means for our people. We want to redefine what foreign policy means for our people, what pursuing an independent economic agenda means for our people, and all of these issues that oftentimes makes it to the foreign policy blueprint of a nation. And understanding that this is a far more challenging task beyond just rhetorics, calls for a total reawakening of leaders within the region, because what we are faced right now is not just the regular campaign issues of building quite a rich rhetorics that will attract, will gain traction, across media platforms. But we're talking about real issues that impact the center of life in various sectors of the economy, that we're talking about issues that impact the blueprint, the development blueprint of the nation. In a long-term design. So for the Sahel region, I would say it is a good start, but so much depends on merely dancing too early during the day, because there are real issues to talk about. In the course of the conversation, we're going to open up such issues as human rights issues. So I'll leave it for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Queenie. And we continue with you, Maupin, of course, having your holistic analysis of the revolution across the Sahelian states, and of course to take some interest in what your organization, the Center for Political Innovation, has actually, the agenda that you've actually crafted for the African continent, and showing support to the revolutionary movement that is propelling Africa to its real sovereign entity position that it deserves, especially in line with international connections and interactions.
Sure. Well, it's an honor to be joining this program today with two of my colleagues from the Center for Political Innovation, as well as other important voices. And when we talk about imperialism, we're talking about an economic system where Wall Street and London dominate the world and keep the world poor in order to keep themselves rich, and are grinding nations across the world into poverty in order to enrich themselves. And you can look at the great work of Kwame Nkrumah and his book Neo-Colonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, describing this. You can look at the work of various anti-colonial fighters in the history of Africa and see their understanding of an economic system where big banks and monopolies prevent development and keep nations as impoverished, captive markets and client states. And that's the reality that the Sahel states faced. France was their former colonizer, and while they may have nominally gained independence, they were kept under the domination of French monopolies and French corporations, and they also faced the scourge of extremist terrorist organizations that were engaged in all kinds of violence against the population. And Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso were all suffering at the hands of these terrorists. They were kept in chronic underdevelopment with their economy under the domination of French colonialism. And it was the revolution that brought an end to that brought a change. And a new government emerged, and Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso now have a pro-growth government, a government focused on raising the people out of poverty. And we've seen really dramatic achievements in terms of what has been done in terms of education.
Of the
Sorry, I'm muted. I'm muted. Was I muted? Should I continue?
We can hear you now.
Oh, okay, sure. I just wanted to say that we respect the sovereignty of the African people, and obviously we have no desire to tell the African people how they should run their country, but we understand that this economic system of imperialism, the rule of the world by these big monopolies that are impoverishing the world, this is not only something that the people on the African continent are heroically fighting against, it's something that Americans must learn to oppose as well. Because at one point you could say that perhaps our living standard was rising at the expense of the people of the world, but that's the past. Right now, America is economically falling apart. Our roads and bridges are crumbling, living standards are going down, our life expectancy is dropping, because our leaders are committed to maintaining this international system. The only real future for America is to join with the rising new economy, with Russia, with China, with the Union of Sahel States, and to trade with countries on the basis of win-win cooperation. We need to break the power of these big financial monopolies that are trying to hold back growth, and we need a pro-growth, anti-monopoly government right here in the United States. And the Union of Sahel States is a great example of what a government could be doing to improve the lives of its people. But right now, our government in the United States is committed to maintaining war around the world, and that is something we must oppose. And raising awareness about Ibrahim Traore and the other African leaders and what they've accomplished is an effort that our organization has taken on and takes very seriously. Education needs to be done, and ultimately we need a movement in America against globalism and against imperialism, saying that our enemy is not in Iran, our enemy is not on the African continent, our enemy is not in Cuba or Venezuela, our enemy is Wall Street and London, and the American people must join with the people of the world in their struggle against the big monopolies. We need a government of action that fights for working families and is pro-growth.
Indeed, protecting the interests of the working families. And I think during an interview, the president of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore, reiterated the need to see that there is practical development on the ground to ensure that citizens do not actually suffer, because vulnerability leads to radicalism, which of course will lead to sustained insecurity due to manipulation of the vulnerable society or people. In the same perspective with you, Penny, we are looking at imperialism, and then we are looking at globalism, which has been highlighted in the preamble of our program this day. I would love to have your own interpretation of how, the new wind of change across the Sahelian states is actually challenging globalism, and how this is actually presenting the bloc as a giant power towards, ending many decades of colonial dominance, mainly by France and some Western nations.
Yeah, thank you for the question. What I've learned in my research is really stunning, because as I'm researching each of the countries, I see how they've rewritten the laws to increase the state's shareholding in the mines. For example, Mali took on the world's largest gold mine, Barrick, and when they increased the state's share and Barrick was refusing to pay past taxes, there was a legal battle. And in Western countries where the corporations run the government, well, the corporation would not be forced to pay consequences. But Mali seized 3 metric tons of gold from a mine and immobilized it until the legal dispute was completed. And in that time, they put the mine under state control, and a helicopter came and seized another 1 ton of metric gold to pay for the management of the mine that was under state control. And ultimately, Barrick Gold was forced to comply and pay $835 million to settle the lawsuit. And that money goes for roads and bridges and schools and electricity and hospitals. So I'm seeing that pattern across the 3 states. They're not allowing multinational corporations to come and exploit them and leave behind pollution and cancer. But that money has to be reinvested into the country, because the people own the resources. It's their country. They should be allowed to develop and not be kept poor because a CEO from another country wants to hold on to all the wealth. So I see also that they are having an influence on other countries, because ambassadors from other countries, and even Somalia, are coming to Burkina Faso and presenting their credentials and seeing how they can work together. Togo opened their ports to them, even when ECOWAS had closed relations with them. And Benin is an ally, Ghana is an ally. Ghana is learning from Burkina Faso that they need to produce their own tomatoes, because Burkina Faso banned the export of tomatoes because they have their own tomato factories now that are producing hundreds of thousands of tons a month of tomatoes for their own brand, the Dadia brand. So they are showing other African countries what a leader looks like, what development looks like, that it's resource sovereignty. Under Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso, the UN had complete food sovereignty, and that is the goal. He who feeds you controls you. So they're feeding their people, and they're raising them out of poverty, and they're investing in entrepreneurship as well. So it's freedom is about economic development, not just whatever you feel like in the moment.
Freedom is about economic development, and it is often said that the economic prowess of a nation will always determine how strong its voice can resonate, especially on very strategic issues. And now I will come to you, Otto Mobley, to have your own interpretation of, do you really think the Alliance of Sahel States do have that capacity to to defeat modern day imperialism, given the geopolitics of resistance that is happening in the region. We saw the attack on Mali, and of course the challenges that are still looming at this juncture. Your mic is muted, please.
There we go. Does that
Okay, all good
fix
now.
it? Okay. I think what's happening in the Sahel is a great start. What Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger and even other states in the region is a great start to align. If Africa's biggest, most dreadful, dire enemy was slavery and colonialism, our new challenge is balkanization. And the continued balkanization of the African continent is going to be something that Africa is going to have to address as a whole. It would be nice, it would be wonderful if Europe and the United States and China and Russia could assist in de-balkanizing Africa so that Africa can sustain itself and can survive in dealing with some of its other challenges. That would be great, but I don't think that they are ready to do that because many of them, the countries that I mentioned, benefit from the exploitation of Africa through balkanization. And we're going to see and continue to see a lot of that drift. Actually, 66 years ago today, this area became independent. Mali became independent, but at that time, in 1960, it was connected with Senegal and Gambia. It was one country, but here comes balkanization. The French came right back in after independence and said, well, we need to cut Mali off from the oceans and having water access, essentially landlocking Mali, and created Senegal as a separate country. Same thing with Gambia, which river locked the rest of Senegal and created Gambia, or allowed the creation of Gambia, and we see the results of both of those maneuvers, but they were engineered by the French. So we see the hidden hand continuing. It is a hand of colonialism. The U.S. is an extreme partner in colonialism, even though it tries to hide its distinction among a myriad of so-called efforts, from the United Nations to the EU to ECOWAS, to any means it can undermine the independence of these new fledgling micro-states in Africa. And in doing so, it creates advantage for itself to continue to exploit, as Dr. Ukwini and Caleb and Penny have amplified and shared additional information on. So it's a start, but it's not the first time we've started this. We can go back to independence. Algeria started with a significant movement to independence, but it was crushed because of balkanization. Southern Africa had a tremendous movement when liberation came to Southern Africa through the Patriotic Front and the states there in the South who were trying to fight for their independence independently, and they were crushed and pushed back because of balkanization. Now we see the Sahel coming to prominence, and we saw Libya in the meantime, and a couple of other countries between now and then come to a state of sovereignty, only to be reversed and pushed back because balkanization, colonialism's traces are still there. So we have to deal with the overarching problem of balkanization. We cannot survive in Africa as 4 to 56 little independent states trying to vie for an ability to sit at a table and negotiate with a China or negotiate with Russia or US. It can't be done. We have to consolidate. And in that respect, the Sahel states are right on target. We need all of Africa to follow that same model and become one continental force and join forces so that we can sit at a table with a country as big as the U.S.
Absolutely, with one vision to ensure that there is economic, political, and of course social sovereignty, among others, across Africa. And looking at it from the social perspective with you, Noah, when we look at the revolution, some pundits have coined it some sort of a pro-growth and pro-transformation revolution. I think this ties so much with the preamble of the CPR, and of course, so in your own perspective and from the aspect of probably human to human diplomacy in the context of the revolution across the Sahelian states, what can you write of its capability to bring about, reduce completely, or even eradicate Western dominance to ensure a more, sustainable governance that meets the realities of the contemporary society?
Well, what Burkina Faso and the Alliance of Sahel States are really doing is they're carrying on the legacy of folks like Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe, the legacy of people like Isabel dos Santos in Angola, of Muammar Gaddafi, and of course in Libya, and of course the legacy of Thomas Sankara and Burkina Faso, which of course means the land of upright men. And what the Alliance of Sahel States have really done is they've stood upright, and they've kicked out the French colonialists, they've kicked out AFRICOM and the military contractors that were spreading terrorism in their country. I remember when I was in college, we took a class on international relations, and they told us about how important it was for the United States to set up shop in Africa because we were allegedly fighting terrorism. And when you pointed out to them how al-Shabaab's membership had tripled since United States involvement in the region, they would look at you like confused, like those were completely unrelated statements. When we know actually that it is the United States' fault that terrorism is spreading across the African continent, that terrorism is spreading across the Middle East, and if Africa is going to have any sovereignty, if they're going to pursue development, then it's going to be a turn away from the West and doing what the Alliance of Sahel States has been doing, bringing in military contractors and developing their own military to fight terrorism. I'd like to turn for a moment to talk about the role of French colonialism, because unfortunately in the United States there are a lot of the left, as we've raised in some of our books at the Center for Political Innovation, like A Letter to Bob Avakian. A lot of the left has been captured by the French colonialists, are doing the bidding of French imperialists, whether they know it or not. The French, for example, were huge pushers of the Iran nuclear deal. And why is that? It's because the French are hugely involved with nuclear energy. But where is it that the French get the uranium to enrich and to develop their nuclear energy? Well, it actually comes from Niger. It comes from robbing the people of Niger. And progressive forces in the United States have always been, it has always been in their interest to oppose French colonialism and the poverty that it imposes, not only on the people of Africa, but the people all around the world. 60,000 American troops died during the Vietnam War, a war meant to keep Vietnam, which was also originally a French colony, under the domination of the Western financial system. I would highly recommend by C.L.R. James, a book, Black Jacobins, which talks about the revolution in Haiti against French colonialism, and that the forces in the United States that were trying to pull America away from the Western financial system, away from the British financial system, folks like Alexander Hamilton, who was a phenomenal economist who opposed imperialism. He was for supporting Haiti, who, and many have pointed out, was living far more up to the legacy of the French Revolution than the French themselves, of liberté, égalité, fraternité. And that is really values that humanity should really seek after, values like development, like freedom, like human rights, these things that we're often told these interventions in the West are supposedly to accomplish. Then what we need to be supporting folks like Ibrahim Traoré on the African continent, and what they have been doing to really bring sovereignty to the people of the world.
Absolutely, sovereignty that is not defined by the traditional superpowers, but sovereignty that meets the realities of shifting alliances and, of course, of multilateralism. In, of course, that will propel the country towards becoming more independent. But then, how can the Sahelian state attend this with the existing challenges? Over 2 years, Africa is still watching and seeing the total transformation that is coming across, of course, carried by these revolutionary leaders, as some pundits call it. Just to let ladies and gentlemen, that I want to at this moment welcome Professor Gabila Nobong, international relations expert, researcher, and a political economist. Of course, it ties. How can we are looking at the levers that the Sahelian leaders can actually use to be able to stand firm against modern day imperialism that is taking different tactics. Welcome to Global Insight this day, Professor Gabila.
Thanks so much, Clarisse, and good afternoon to you and to my fellow panelists. I think that they are facing a very uphill task, and they are making a lot of progress. We see the sort of infrastructure projects that are coming out of Burkina Faso, development of rail and strengthening of different sectors in agriculture and in health and education. And I think that holds in itself the glue and the strengthening element that is supposed to strengthen the revolution. I think the short answer is do well by your people. Make sure that you keep the interest at the very heart of it. Try and combat the evils and the challenges of porous governance and corruption, and you build the sort of strengthening mechanism that the revolution takes to sustain itself. I think that it's a step in the right direction. There have been gains. They'll not be able to redress all the problems immediately. The results are not going to be immediately visible, but I think that investing in the people, empowering them, strengthening them, developing their knowledge base, intensity of technology within those countries, and basically strengthening and empowering the people to sustain the growth and expansion of those economies is the long-term solutions to a sustainable revolution. Because at the end of the day, the greatest wealth of every country is its people. So to the extent to which this current revolution is addressing the challenges of the past and dealing with the challenges of resource access and utilization and channeling and redirecting those resources to empower the people, then they are building the solid base for a people that would own the vision and run with it. So I think that would be a people first, take care of the people, treat the people, prepare the people to run with the revolution. I think that is the solution to the sustainability of the current revolution.
Indeed, I'll stay with you, Professor Gabila. Looking at the sustainability of the current revolution, it is also imperative to analyze some stakes, especially proxy interests that is either mine or actually fostering this revolution. In your own perspective as an international relations expert and strategies. How do you think the leaders in probably their roadmap can tackle this proxy interest, which we have seen in recent times, which have attacked this, the agenda of the Sahelian states? We're talking about attacks on Mali and other countries, even recently in Niger, though they are being actually contained, but then it still shows the resistance that is coming from proxy elements present across the Africa. And how can the Sahelian states actually tackle this to ensure that the road is smooth for the next 5 years to ensure balance in the agenda?
Yeah, Clarisse, I think it's a question of continuous vigilance, right? It's a question of continuous vigilance and strengthening their capacity to defend themselves. Obviously, when revolutions of this nature take place, there are very strong influences that are challenged and displaced, who are not going to go down without a fight. So I think that it's about being able to have a mastery of the security infrastructure and being able to continuously develop and build and strengthen their capacity to defend themselves. This has to go from a security and technical perspective with military capabilities, but also over and above all, the sort of messaging and the sort of branding and sort of communication that advances the what do you call it, the bien fondé, the essence, the good reason, justification for their cause. So building alliances, building friends, expanding the network of their partnerships all across the region, establishing connections with goodwill of African civil society for neighboring countries like Nigeria and Ghana, and just making friends, making sure that your neighbors are looking after your interests and your neighbors are taking care of your backside. So it's about making friends, it's about staying vigilant, it's about establishing partnerships, it's about empowering the people, it's about making sure that the benefits are well shared and well distributed amongst your people. So there has to be an internal defense mechanism and an external protection mechanism through the establishment of friendship and strategic partnerships. I think it's interesting to note at this point that there are a number of elsewhere powers that have expressed an interest to reimagine new relationships. I know, and of course, I've heard of recent that the American government has sent envoys to the region to go and express interest in discussions around critical minerals. That too is the dynamism that requires to be able to manage a change process of this nature. To understand that we have no permanent friends or enemies in international relations, we have permanent interests. And if you have an administration that comes forward to say that we are willing to have a conversation about the articulation of different kinds of interests, is to be able to have the ability to establish the new partnerships that are required for that purpose, and to be able to set it up in such a way that it benefits and is in the interest of the people. So I think that is about internal protections, external protection mechanisms, being able to articulate and defend the interest of the people, and having the wisdom to strike new deals with new partners. So you have to learn the lessons of having dealt with the others of the past. You have to learn the lessons of having said that we have had to deal with the previous crop of imperialists that really do not change in their approach, but that in this day and age and with these new opportunities, how do we build new alliances with new partners? And I would not be prescriptive in that regard. I just think that it's about taking advantage of the opportunities that present themselves. Yes, there's a historical sentiment that says there are hard feelings between these countries and some of their previous partners, but I feel that there is an opportunity to strike new deals on new terms. Because if there's anything that the last couple of years has demonstrated to the rest of the world and to the previous partners, is that the parameters on the ground have changed. Now, do you want to go back and do business with the people who once did business if they want to come and negotiate on new terms? Or do you want to look for new partners that's going to make the dynamism of the partnerships to be diverse? Now, if the Americans say we're interested in coming in and we want to strike new deals with critical minerals in spaces that were previously occupied by the French, now it's up to you as the Sahel countries to make a determination whether you want to do business with the Americans in replacement of the French. So you need to be able to articulate your strategic interest from that perspective to say, okay, does the American administration we are dealing with, are they trustworthy? Can we do business with them? And then, as our parents taught us when we were growing up, you do business with them, both of your eyes open, or you eat with them with a long spoon, as the African proverb goes. So I think it's important to strengthen internal capabilities, forge new partnerships within the region, clearly identify those who are for or against you, and then interact with them on those bases, and be open with caution to reestablish strategic alliances with new interested partners, and strike those deals that are going to sort of reinforce your protection and your interest. I don't necessarily want to argue whether or not it's a good thing to switch partnership from the French, say, to the Americans. But at the end of the day, it's about who is sitting in the room and who is doing business with you. Because the French and the Americans do business with the Asians and the Chinese, and they do not get the same sort of outcomes and results that they do get in Africa. So it's about your negotiations ability and ability to be able to identify the right deal makers and make deals with them. I don't think that there should necessarily be a predefined ideological predisposition to who you do business with. Yes, you must learn lessons from your experience of the past, but you must have the openness and the flexibility to realize that you're going to be in a position where you have to make new friends, but you just need to pick and choose your friends carefully. There's a proverb that says that keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer. So that would not be prescriptive in terms of who they do business with, but there's importance to build both internal and external partnerships with the kind of wisdom that will strengthen and sustain the current move in the Sahel countries.
Which is very important. The strategy is what is key at this moment, and of course it is bringing us to look at still the levers to fight imperialism in Africa. And according to some reports, to do that, Africa needs, of course, to move from political independence to some sort of total economic and even monetary independence. But we know that is still a problem, particularly with French-speaking African countries. Now, let's come to you to understand this strategy and what it can entail to ensure that Africa, especially under the banner of the Confederation of Sahel States, breaks free from this entanglement that has actually stifled practical emancipation and its sovereignty over the years. Dr. Maupin.
Yeah, could you come over? I didn't get you clearly.
Still on the strategy, in your own perspective, what do you think are those strategic points or levels that countries, especially the Confederation of the Sahel States, can use across Africa to ensure that they break free from the entanglement, especially of monetary and financial and even cultural entanglement regarding relationship with former colonial masters, particularly France?
Oh, okay. So first of all, it is important to know that the journey to self-freedom is one that requires total strategic balance. It is not a journey of self-isolation. And like one of the speakers mentioned earlier, you have to collaborate with other regions, other actors to get yourself out there and see what you can offer. And then so far, I like what the Sahel states are doing currently, because they've been able to solidify strategic military and technical alliances with Russia and of course China and Turkey and Iran. And apart from that, it has also gone into some levels of collaborations in terms of a sort of a unified force that has been able to pull together 5,000 joint military battalion. And of course, the purpose is to conduct, to boost internal security, to combat terrorism, that is spreading across the region. And then there are other levels of collaboration in terms of monetary reforms, where there is an ongoing effort to replace the CFA franc. These are strategic moves, and if managed properly, it can carve a niche for itself in the Committee of Nations. It can put it out on a global stage as a more serious actor, leading towards more engagement, a more credible engagement, of course. And then there's even what we call from research, what they call the AES TV network, a kind of local TV network that seems to tell the story. I mean, based on what the realities are on ground, tell the story as it affects the people better than having a story that is superimposed from foreign actors. And of course, it is so important for the angle to democratic institutional development to be solidified. Democratic institutions have to be put out in a way that can restore public trust, that this is not just about a military junta that is out to take power and perpetuate itself in power. It has to set out democratic institutions, tenure-based leadership structures that makes it quite clear, that it is indeed a government that is interested in building democratic values. Its democratic ethos has to be very clear for the world to see, and then access it on the basis of what it says it is going to do. So this is just to emphasize that it is so important that the Alliance of Sahel States cannot act cannot act in economic isolation, because first of all, it is a landlocked region, so it cannot in any way act in self-isolation. So, of course, earlier on I mentioned other challenges it has. For example, the security vacuum that is staring very boldly on their face. Of course, we used to have the United Nations multi-dimensional integrated stabilization mission in Mali, and the U.S. drones operations. All of that has left, and has created some measure of deficit in the region. We have territorial expansion of terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda and the rest of them. So all of these poses some levels of security challenges, and it has to brace up if it is serious about dealing with these issues. Of course, you have asymmetric warfare, escapades, over 5,000 troop commands cannot deal with the logistic capabilities to protect a civilian population that is expanding daily. And of course, we have internally displaced persons and the need for some sort of international assistance in terms of aid, to remediate that solution. So all of this creates some levels of human and social challenges that the Alliance of Sahel States has to come out of its shell to truly understand that moving forward is building reasonable bilateral, multilateral alliances that would help it come off to fulfilling its promise to its people. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Kweni. And talking about multilateral alliances, we come back to you, Caleb Maupin. Here, while talking earlier, you made mention of the fact that the African continent, particularly the revolutionary Sahelian region, have actually engaged with other strategic partners to ensure its full emancipation and control of sovereignty. Let's try to analyze this great power competition and how it has actually been, to an extent, a challenge towards this revolutionary agenda of the Sahelian states. We're talking about a series of coup attempts, especially on Ibrahim Traore. The latest protest was seen in Mali that led even to the demise of the defense minister, and it brings us to the understanding of the geopolitical contestations happening in the Sahel region. So at this juncture, to be able to navigate and fight this imperialism, how can we tactically tackle this great power competition for the interest of the region and actually not for proxy interest?
Well, I liked what Professor Nabon said earlier when he talked about how important it is for the Union of Sahel States to connect with other countries that are struggling against colonialism and imperialism. And he emphasized that point, and I thought that was a very well-made point, because really, when the revolution was carried out against the French colonizers, it was a revolution against the entire Western system, against the old colonial powers that have dominated so much of the world for so long, and have dominated it on the basis of an economic order that is about impoverishment and the extraction of super profits and the impoverishing and the destruction of economies on the African continent. You can think about the great book written by Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, and the way we're taught to think of these things is that some countries are just naturally poor and some countries are just naturally rich, and that's just the way the world is. The reality is that the African continent is very wealthy in terms of minerals, in terms of oil, in terms of human labor power, which is the source of all wealth in this world, human creativity and labor power. The African continent is very wealthy, but the control of its wealth has been in the hands of Western multinational corporations, big international bankers and monopolies that have kept these countries impoverished. And that's what we need to understand, and that there is a rising new economy that's centered around Russia and China. You've got the axis of resistance in the Middle East. You've got the Bolivarian movement in Latin America, and the Union of Sahel States is part of that. When Professor Nabong was talking about international relations, I had to think of, we at the Center for Political Innovation, we've been distributing this booklet, and in the booklet we have an image of this beautiful, beautiful monument, the Monument of African Renaissance that was constructed in Senegal. And this is a beautiful, beautiful monument celebrating the future of the African people. It's got, an African father and mother holding their child pointing toward the future, really pointing forward. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful monument. And who constructed this in Senegal? It was constructed by engineers, architects, and workers from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea, because the North Korean government, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, sees itself as a government that is a continuation and is aligned with anti-colonial struggles around the world. And this pamphlet that we've distributed thousands of across America is called "Why Can't You Get This Flower in America?" And it is about Kim Il-sung, the flower named after Kim Il-sung, the leader of the Korean Revolution, and it's a flower from Indonesia that was gifted to Kim Il-sung by Sukarno, the great leader of the Indonesian people, who was brutally murdered. There was a brutal coup backed by the United States in 1965, and that you have to understand what AES is doing in the context of a global struggle against imperialism and colonialism that really began, with the Russian Revolution and the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 that laid the foundations for it, the Congress of the Peoples of the East that took place, where the Soviet Union said that they would back anyone who struggled against imperialism. They even would support the Emir of Afghanistan, a conservative monarchist, but he was ready to battle the British Empire, and he did in the Third Anglo-Afghan War, and they supported him because colonialism and imperialism, this economic order, was considered to be the main enemy of humanity. And the BRICS economy that is arising now is really the result of what began in the 20th century with so many anti-colonial revolutions and continues right up to today. The essence of it is a struggle struggle for growth, and that the imperialists have really embraced the Malthusian conception. That's what we're always told in America, is the reason Africa is poor is they just have too many children. They have too many people, right? We're told that the economic problems of the world are due to this myth, this lie called overpopulation. Well, there is no such thing as overpopulation. Human beings are creative creatures, and it's human beings that are the source of wealth. But the World Economic Forum, the Council on Foreign Relations, and all the think tanks that represent the ultra monopolies of the West are talking about overpopulation because they believe human beings are the problem, because they know human beings want growth. And that if humanity keeps rising and having economic growth, they won't be at the top any longer. And so their solution is to drive down the population and impoverish people. They want to set up a low-wage police state in America. They've got all kinds of dark, sinister schemes for a high-tech dark ages they've thought of. You'll live in a pod, you'll own nothing, you'll eat bugs, and you'll be happy about it. They want to reduce humanity to a mere biological existence. They view human beings almost like livestock. Whereas the rising economy that we see in the Union of Sahel States is they view human beings as a great resource, human labor power and human creativity as something that should be nurtured and cultivated as the source of all wealth. And that seems to be the real disagreement. The leaders of the Western colonial order view humanity as the problem. They want to contain, restrain, and drive down the population of humanity. They view humans as the problem, whereas in the AES and in China and in Russia and in the Bolivarian countries and in the axis of resistance in the Middle East, they view human beings as the solution and as the answer. And that really is the difference. We need to invest in human labor power. We need to view human beings as a great asset that can produce wealth, that can create new inventions. We need to think of what humanity could do if we got beyond the nightmare of fossil fuels. What China's doing in terms of fusion energy is really rooted in the idea that human beings are the problem and is rooted in an outmoded colonial system. And there is a rising new economy in the world. And what the Center for Political Innovation aims to do is to build a pro-growth, pro-humanity movement in America that positions the United States to join the rising new economy of the world and reject the British Empire ideology that our country has been wedded to for so long, but really goes against what Americans believe down in their bones. Americans want economic growth just like the African people do. The American people, when it gets down to it, they want an economy where human labor power is unleashed and growth and innovation can expand, and they don't support these wars our leaders are waging all over the world. So the Center for Political Innovation aims to give voice to the truly American sentiments of being pro-growth, wanting win-win cooperation with countries around the world, and rejecting the war and empire that our leaders are committed to.
Absolutely, yeah. And ending imperialism would mean that the tactics that imperialists do use on the ground are actually curtailed. With you, Penny, we are looking at how insecurity is acting as a major toll in the Sahel region and elsewhere to be able to sustain the activities of large corporations. And of course, how can we use the example of the Sahel region to probably educate the population, not just in Africa and across the world, about the gimmicks, especially in line with large corporations, and how there is need to dissociate from such ideological alignment to be able to break free from the shackle of colonialism, neocolonialism, and tackle modern day imperialism.
Thank you for the question. What I see in the Alliance of Sahel States is the unity. They can't do it on their own, and they have aligned with other allies that are supporting them, and we support them. But one project they have across the region is seed sovereignty. They developed an alliance of agricultural seed producers of the Sahel. They cultivate, market, distribute, and locally adapted seeds. And they also have a joint purchasing agency for cereals. So they're also, obviously one of our guests said that they have the 5,000 troops across the region, because you have to be able to enforce your laws against these corporations that are sending the terrorists to destabilize the region. We saw in Mali the attacks on the airport because of the dispute with the uranium, because Mali had declared they would sell the uranium to whoever they want. And then the attacks on the airport. So I see that they're able to stand up against the multinational corporations because they have the alliance, the strength of the alliance across the borders. There's a lot of terrorism that happens across the borders, and Ibrahim Troy has said that the terrorism is a result of imperialism. It's meant to keep them destabilized so they don't develop their own resources. So the leaders of the Alliance of Sahel States are educating their people about why they're under attack and how important it is to maintain social cohesion and loyalty to the revolution. We talk about democracy and human rights. The human rights came from Mali, from the ancient charter. And President Ibrahim Troy in 2025, when he publicly announced that they are not a democracy, they are a progressive populist revolution, he says no country's ever developed with democracy. That comes next. So I think that with the AES TV and with putting the people's needs first and establishing alliances with other countries around the world as well as in Africa, and maintaining a Pan-Africanist vision that the fight is not against each other, the fight is not against one color or one preferred belief, it's against the international corporations. And as the people understand that, which is what we're doing in the Center for Political Innovation, is educating Americans that our fight is not against red team, blue team, it's against the international corporations, that we have to have a popular movement to be able to push back on these corporations, because ultimately we are the majority, and we just need to realize that our power is in the majority and in uniting, and human beings are the only source of wealth in the world. These corporations need human labor to actually have wealth, and if we educate the people to understand that, just like the Alliance of Sahel States, taking control of our natural resources to fund education and healthcare and roads and bridges is really the solution. And so I see that the social cohesion across religions and across socioeconomic boundaries and across political boundaries is really the strength of the Sahel States that we can take an example from.
Indeed, take an example from the Confederation of Sahelian States. And back to you, Otto Bobley, you highlighted the aspect of unity, which I think resonates still with what some school of thought always hold regarding how the strategy that Africa needs to reach that point of respect and dignity in line with its sovereignty, especially political sovereignty. And we see that this has actually attracted, the activities of the Sahelian states have attracted the African Union, where we saw a confederation on aspects of security, diplomacy, and otherwise. Now, let's try to see how this strategy can work towards, forming a unified foreign policy stance, not just for the Sahelian state, but then for the African continent as a whole, to be able to actually defeat imperialism. It is coming back in different ways. Recently, we saw the president of France, Macron, in Kenya, and of course, him calling himself a Pan-Africanist, and we understand the tactics and strategies when it comes to geopolitics and diplomacy and sphere of influence. So what do you think can be done to ensure that this the position of the African Union with the Confederation of the Sahelian State will stand to counteract the hybrid tactics that imperialists are actually defining at this juncture of the African revolution?
Well, that's an excellent question, and we need to look at the collective defense of Africa. When the Sahel states are being attacked by forces, and we'll get into that in a second, there should be a rallying around the Sahel states by every corner, every sector of Africa. Africa has tremendous military resources across the continent, and we should not fall back into the trap of depending too heavily on a unilateral basis with China, with Russia, with European Turkey, or any of these other alliances, because those alliances can fall away. Look what happened with Russia back in the early 90s. There were so many countries dependent upon Russia for military support as well as economic and material support. And then when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was nothing. There was nothing to support Cuba. There was nothing to support Venezuela. There was nothing to support many of the states in Africa who had aligned that way. And the West took advantage of it. They came right in and took full advantage of the vacuum that was there. So Africa has to depend on Africans. It has to depend on its sister states right across these flimsy borders that we're talking about that are so permeable. Penny talked about Al-Qaeda and how Al-Shabaab and these organizations who consider themselves creating some super caliphate where Islam is going to be shared and taught. Yet they never have once gotten together to address Zionism. And if they are not addressing Zionism, who are these people? And why are they in Africa attempting to put Africa under some kind of structure, or if that's what they call it? We know that this is a more apt to be a facade, maybe something in the category of a false flag operation, but it is even speculated that it might be something that is being financed and generated in the West. We surely know that Zionism right now is funding the UAE, and the UAE is in turn funding the crippling and the financial war in Sudan. So these seeds have roots and they have strings that attach them back to their origins. Those of us who are Pan-Africanists and who have been working in the Pan-African sphere of dominance internationally understand that we are a movement that needs to assert itself, particularly in Africa, but Africa has to understand that there is a Pan-African movement that can be there to be extremely helpful. We can no longer depend on European power, European people to come into Africa and pose to do the work of what the Pan-African movement is supposed to be about, but they come in and they address the problems from a completely different or European perspective or from a Western perspective, and the same kinds of antics continue. So we do need to again just reassert our own positioning as African people internationally and stop treating Africa like it's a marketplace and everything in Africa is for sale. And the only thing that we have is resources that we can sell from under the ground. Those kinds of elements, those people need to be rooted out from Africa, and they need to be expelled from the continent because that's not the priority. The number one resource of Africa is its people. And if they don't understand that, they need to certainly get off the litmus test and move on and go play those games somewhere else. we have to solve the basic problems of the African people, and we have to instill and encourage unity. And if groups want to come into Africa and help Africa to unify. If you're not there to break down this balkanization and these colonial borders and change the dynamic so that Africa can really self-sustain, and we can only self-sustain by cooperating with each other, our sister states, then you need to rethink your strategy as those intervening organizations.
Very imperative, and the unity is vital towards attaining the Africa agenda, building the Africa we want on the Agenda 2063. How can this be done? Resistance comes from knowledge, and of course, it has been happening across the African continent thanks to the fourth industrial revolution that has actually changed the course, especially of interpretation of internal and even external processes across the African continent that has brought us to this position of the Confederation of Sahelian States, where we are talking about progress looking at the Sahel region. It's because of its endowment, especially in resources needed by great powers for the production of berries and other aspects, especially the Sahelian states can stand as that giant block to oversee the some beginning of probably resource diplomacy that will make Africa benefit more from its raw materials or resources, that will lead to a real transformation in terms of infrastructure, living standards, and other aspects.
Well, Clarisse, I guess there's really no option that they have. They are coming late to the party on the question, and unfortunately, for whatever collection of reasons, this process had to start at some point. And the good thing is that the current countries are seeming to be heading in the right direction. Now, drawing from the classical resource curse sort of argument, countries that own resources need to valorize them. They need to develop the ability to be able to identify, explore, process, value add, transform, take to the market. All of those steps are knowledge intensive, and for the time being, most African countries have just been able to, including a Sahel country, the only claim that they have had to these resources has been the claim of ownership. Now, the fact that you own something, if you cannot valorize it, it almost becomes useless to you. Now, we're not talking about we're not yet, I'm not arguing here about the question of, well, the fact that you cannot explore it does not mean that somebody is going to abuse it. So there's the justice and equity and fairness, and you cannot mess with me argument that we're still dealing with, which is what the current regime is handling. But there is the whole responsibility to develop the ability to explore and valorize those resources that becomes the top priority of the current entity. As long as you own resources that you cannot identify, you cannot mine, you cannot process, you cannot transform, you cannot valorize, you cannot add value, you cannot take to the global market, those resources mean nothing to you. So in a classical cost assessment perspective, you need to draw the roadmap that says that I need to move from resource ownership to resource valorization on a step-by-step basis. And it's not going to come overnight. For you to be able to build the capacity to be able to valorize those resources, you must develop the technology intensity. And unfortunately, you are coming to the party at a time when lots of first movers have acquired the technology that it takes to explore those resources. That's just down outright reality. I own the resources, you own the technology to explore it. My objective is to be able to, in the interim, make use of your technology by establishing the kind of strategic deals that becomes a win-win. That says that you can explore my resources in a mutually beneficial way. That says that you derive some benefit because to acquire the technology that you have, you did invest in research and development, and so that is sort of your intellectual capital. So let's not make any argument about the fact that the technology is sitting on the one side. but it is your technology, it's my resources. I need to be able to then strike the kinds of deals that says that I will not eat those resources raw because I own them. I want to valorize them. So I need to find the kind of partners around the world that are going to participate in the process of valorizing that resource while deriving benefits to me in the interim while I build my own capacity. So the responsibility of the current stock of AS leaders is to be able to pursue this resource valorization strategy in a true-pronged approach. How do we gain value in the existing context of low intense knowledge, low technology, low abilities to explore and valorize by building partnerships with friendly nations that have been proven to be fair in business so that they can help us to develop the capacity. But that resource revenue that comes in at this point, those IAS countries need to make sure that they do not fall into the trap that countries like Nigeria, excuse me to give the example, are falling into. To make sure that as the resources come in, they have both the discipline and the clarity of vision to channel those resources to empower their people to catch up on the technology gap, to catch up on the intensity of knowledge gap. That is the clear pathway. Now, you cannot imagine engineers into your countries. You cannot imagine scientists. You need to develop them, you need to school them, you need to educate them. So there has to be a clear developmental program in place that says that in terms of the endowments that we have at the moment, projected into the future to produce batteries, we're getting into electronic vehicles, project the business needs of the future in the next 50 years, and develop the human capital and technology capabilities locally, then be able to valorize those resources in the short to medium to the long term. That is the mission. That is the in the classical Fanon sense, that is the generational mission of this generation of IAS leaders, to make sure that they are both securing the resources, stopping themselves from being exploited by imperialist forces, but striking deals that generate the kinds of excesses that it can take for them to develop their own capacity. Once they build capacity in education, in developing capabilities, in advancing in technology, in becoming innovation leaders, then they will be setting themselves a pathway to catch up, a pathway to be able to join the race, a pathway to be able to somewhere along the line get to a point where they tell themselves, we don't need French engineers to exploit our minerals, we don't need German engineers, we don't need African engineers, for the sake of the argument. So it's not about the nationality of the origin of the engineer or the color of their skin. We have capabilities at the moment, so that we don't have to have an anti-imperialist discussion down the line because we can exploit it by ourselves. So that mandate has to be carefully executed. It has to be something that says that we want to, in the current instance, project for ourselves that in the next 5, 10 to 15 to 20 years, we have X number of mining engineers. We have the kinds of technology that it takes to identify explorers. We have the kinds of investments. If we would not buy it, we need to develop locally. And while we are developing it locally, developing local capabilities, we need to be able to acquire that knowledge so that we can valorize at the time being. So for me, that is sort of the joint objectives. It would have to come with strengthened and strong institutions. It would have to come with investing in the people and developing their capabilities to valorize their resources. It would have to come to build the kind of partnerships with the people that would connect you into the global production value chains. You need to essentially come up with an industrialization strategy that says that from this point, this is what we have in our hands. This is what we need to do to become a country like Norway. Let's take resource ownership in Norway and Sweden and the Nordic countries. The creation of sovereign wealth fund that becomes utilized to develop other capabilities in the economy. From the ownership of oil to development of petrochemical industry to the branching off of related value chains in the production process. That is where you say good governance and efficient institutions in the case of the North, in your Norways and your Swedens of the world, contributed today being making use of those resources to empower and develop their people and strengthen their people. That is the African objective. That is the objective of the IAS countries. It doesn't change because it's now in Africa. That is the pathway that has been utilized in most contexts, and that's the pathway that's proven to work. The African challenge is to come from that point from a low-level steady state. It's coming at it from a very low deposit availability of those skills. So it has lots of catching up that is having those own capabilities, and it has to be able to, while doing that, defend its rights to ownership, defend its rights to exploitation, defend its rights to be able to use the resources for the benefit of its people, but impose upon itself the discipline of managing the windfall, of the discipline of managing the abundance that comes in, the discipline of making sure that it's like in the 80s and in the 90s, oil blockades. got so many billions of dollars flowing to Nigerian coffers, and they got so much money from oil that was being exploited out of Nigeria that they got drunk with those resources and created chaos instead of advancing. Nigeria as a country should not be where it is, given the fact that it has been an oil-producing country for the last part of the last 4 or 5 decades. Nigeria should be like the United Arab Emirates in terms of resource ownership. Nigeria should supposed to be Dubai. People are going to Lagos the way they're going to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. What made for the difference is just that resource ownership was combined with effective governance to be able to empower the people. Now, every resource-rich country has that obligation. If your point of departure is your ownership of resources, your responsibility is to manage those resources to empower yourself. If the resources are going to be a source of division, and if you allow imperial forces to come and you had the opportunity to be able to make use of effective governance to close ranks, empower yourself. Now, people respond to incentives. If you allow yourself to be, excuse my friends, put over by people who can come and pitch you against it, you can blame them till the chickens come home to roast. They are business people. They go where opportunities are created for them to explore. If you want them to come through the front door, create strong institutions, straight business partnerships. If you want them to come through the back door, create chaos, and they will come and take advantage of chaos. So I'm here emphasizing on the African responsibility to hold ourselves to higher standards of governance, to hold ourselves to honesty, integrity, and the well-being of our people. No matter how many partnerships we establish with any members of the segments of the world, they will never be able to take care or have the interests of our people more than ourselves. And that has to be clear. So while we fight back on equal partnerships and exploitative relationships that have been in the context of our history, we need to take a step forward, taking care of our own people. We need to value their lives. We need to be able to not wake up and then, because we disagree with the people, go out there and then just kill people. Send army into a village and then they wipe out the whole village and burn the village. We solve our problems with that kind of brutality. Our psychology, our mindset, our civilization, our respect for our own kind needs to significantly improve. That is the sense of collective well-being that makes for the European social contract. Is a whole notion that there is a clearly defined sense of well-being. There's a clearly defined sense of the common good. And it's an agreed social compact that says that let us provide resources to government to manage those resources on behalf of the people, and we'll take care of the general well-being of people. That is the bedrock of functioning Western societies. The ability to be able to identify a common good and agree on that common good and pursue it. Now, Africans, for some reasons, have not gotten to that point. And I know that's a very generalistic statement, because look at Nigeria. Nigeria is a country of multi-millionaires in US dollars, living and driving fancy cars. I mean, if you can think of any luxury car that is manufactured in any corner of this world, you would find it in Lagos. But driving on roads that are not roads, parked next to and sitting in neighborhoods with people that do not have electricity, water, or cannot afford healthcare. The Africans are able to be able to exist in affluence and see their neighbor live in abject poverty is a real imperialism that we have to deal with in the 21st century. Because that inability to feel for kin, it's not because the French came, it's not because the British came. So there's that evolution in our mindset, that evolution in our ability to look after our own. That notion that I cannot be voted a regional governor or made a local government chairman and be given a budget for education, and I just take it and ship it to the UK, and buy a house in London that I visit once in a year, and then come back to my community and give them rice and give them, on infrastructure that I was tasked with the responsibility of developing, in roads that I was tasked with the responsibility, surrounded by education institutions whose budgets I have siphoned over to Switzerland. So that African responsibility, I think, is sort of a balancing act that the Sahel countries need to guard against, because it's a huge challenge that for the last 40, 50, 60 odd years, successive African governments after successive African governments have not succeeded to deal with the fact that the public purse is not a private purse, that state resources are not personal resources, that your country receiving a windfall from an oil blockade in the Strait of Hormuz that gives you oil prices that have gone up that you did not budget for in January, says that you should think about how to close that gap and do it. So that is a governance issue that we need to address, as Africans, and that I pray that these Sahel countries have to deal with. Providing model leadership that takes care of our own, as we see Captain Traore trying to demonstrate to the rest of Africa. So it's a two-way sort of street that has responsibility in the redefinition of our partnerships, in making sure that they're mutually beneficial in the interest of our people, and in making sure that the resources that we can get from the deals that we can strike with the exploitation that we have at the moment, how well we use those resources to build our own capacity. That, for me, holds the key to the future, Clarisse.
Absolutely, very imperative, and it boils down to understanding the rules of the gamer. Coming to you, Caleb, from all of that Professor Gabila has highlighted, to understand that it's indeed a challenging moment, and of course, understanding the rules of the game will help propel Africa through the Sahelian state. So let's get from you, Caleb. What do you think the rules of the game can actually highlight to be able to attain that level of seeing some sort of real governance that transforms into practical development, especially infrastructure development, industrialization and otherwise?
Well, we have seen with the Union of Sahel States an effort to build up the public sector of the economy, to pave the roads, to build power plants, to provide education, to enable businesses in the entrepreneurial sector to flourish in the oversight of a state that is rooted in an anti-colonial revolution. And yes, this is the model. The Soviet way of doing things is not coming back. There is going to be a market, a vibrant market on the African continent as it asserts its independence, but it won't be a society where fictitious capital and usury and speculation is dominant. It'll be a society where physical economy is dominant. That's what we're seeing in the Union of Sahel States. They are focused on raising the productive forces, whereas our Western economy is more and more focused on speculation. False money, fictitious capital that is made, in a lot of cases through the process of destructive accumulation. American corporations are getting wealthier as Americans are getting poorer. We have prisons for profit. We have a military-industrial complex where corporations get rich off of wars around the world. We also have a prison-industrial complex in America where corporations get rich off of locking people in prison. We have a situation where big drug corporations are enriching themselves as people become addicted to drugs, and that in the West, we have a system where profits are in command and the rule of corporations is not restrained, and they increasingly have found ways to enrich themselves at the expense of society overall. Society gets poorer and the bankers get wealthier, right? And this is the downfall of civilization, and this is why every major religion, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam says that usury and the lending of money at interest is to be forbidden because it leads to a creditor class that is exponentially wealthier than everybody else. And that's what we have. We have an economy in the West based on usury and speculation. As they enrich themselves, society gets poorer, and we see the societal fallout. Whereas the economy that's rising around the world is based on physical economy. So that's an important point to understand. One thing, when you talk about the rules of the game, one thing that has been important is the fact that we saw the FBI, the U.S. security agency, go after the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement, a group of Pan-Africanists, African internationalists here in the United States, in the state of Missouri, and in the state of Florida, who have done important work in the black community. They've provided classes for pregnant mothers. They've created farmers markets and prison reentry programs. And in 2022, the FBI raided their homes, flew drones into their homes, dragged them out of their homes in handcuffs, and charged them not with any crime, but simply that they alleged they were acting as foreign agents of Russia because of their speech supporting Russia when it came to the special military operation in Ukraine. And we raised solidarity, loud solidarity with the African People's Socialist Party. We organized a United Nations press conference about the case. I spoke directly with Russian President Vladimir Putin as a representative of the American delegation to the World Youth Festival in 2024 about the Uhuru movement and how the FBI was targeting them for their friendship with Russia. And we raised that case from the heavens because we said if they can make it illegal to express sympathy with countries around the world that are struggling against imperialism. And if they can declare that, speaking up and having Zoom calls and publishing articles is somehow acting as an agent of a foreign power, that makes it almost illegal to be an anti-war activist in America. And we loudly spoke up in support of the Uhuru movement. We organized demonstrations near the United Nations. We organized protests around the country. We raised money. We did everything we could to support that case. And they were found not guilty in federal court of being foreign agents, but they were found guilty on a conspiracy charge. So we intend to be with them on July 22nd at their federal court date coming up in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia, where they will be hoping to get the conspiracy conviction that they faced completely devoided. But it was a huge case, and there were some who spoke up in support of the Uhuru movement. We saw various Russian figures speaking up in their support. We saw Jimmy Dore speaking up to support them. But there was a big absence of solidarity with the African People's Socialist Party from the so-called left. So many of these socialists and communists in America, the Democrat Socialists of America, the various Trotskyite organizations did nothing when a group of black anti-colonial activists were facing 15 years in prison for being allegedly agents of Russia simply because of their speech. And that exposed how much French imperialism and French colonialism has infiltrated the so-called communist groups. The FBI has infiltrated these organizations. 20 or 30 years ago, if a black activist was arrested for allegedly being an agent of Russia because of their speech, every leftist, every socialist, every college professor, every young hippie would have been out there standing with them. But that was not the case because leftism has become focused on LGBT activism, the idea that they want to, force certain cultural values onto the African people, tell them that the way we do things in the West, the way we do things, that must be imposed. Tell African people they shouldn't be allowed to maintain the traditional family. They shouldn't be allowed to uphold their religion and their culture. That has been what the West has kind of manipulated the so-called left into doing. And so many of the socialist and communist groups, they're not focused on opposing imperialism. They're focused on waging a culture war. And it's a culture war against the African people. It's a culture war against Muslims. It's a culture war even against Christians in America. And it's not about opposing imperialism. And it has very little to do with what Stalin was doing in Russia, or with what Mao Zedong was doing in China, or with what the anti-colonial revolutions around the world are focused on. There has been a huge manipulation of leftist activists. And that's an important point to make. And that the George Soros NGO apparatus that kind of has taken control of what calls itself leftist activism has really weakened it. But we at the Center for Political Innovation, we have refused to go along with that. We stand in solidarity with the African People's Socialist Party, with the Uhuru movement against the FBI, just like we stand with Ibrahim Traore. And, Penny Arcos, my colleague here, has written a great expose about how Jacobin magazine, one of these socialist magazines, has become a propaganda outlet, demonizing the Union of Sahel States, demonizing Ibrahim Traore, and that leftism in the West has become hijacked as part of an anti-African, anti-Russia, anti-China agenda. And we at the Center for Political Innovation have defined ourselves in opposition to that. We are building a real anti-colonial movement that is not committed to this kind of culture war that the Western imperialists are committed to and have manipulated so-called left-wing politics to serve. And I think that's an important point to make as well. Solidarity with people struggling against imperialism is not dependent on any cultural position that they take, and it's certainly not demanding that they refuse to stand with Russia and China and countries that have done business with them in a much more fair and respectable way on the basis of win-win cooperation, rather than the basis of impoverishing them. We've seen what the IMF has done around the world, looting countries, impoverishing them. We've seen how instead of fighting the AIDS crisis in Africa, they turned it into a money laundering scheme. The AIDS industry that has been made, where all kinds of wealthy American NGOs are funneling money and manipulating things in the name of supposed supposedly fighting AIDS on the African continent, when in reality they're just enriching themselves and making a name for themselves. There's a lot of cynicism in the so-called activist circles in the West, and a real movement based among the working people of America and their desire for a better life, and making clear that that can only come in a new America beyond imperialism that stands in alliance with the people of the world in the struggle against Wall Street and London and defeating the British Empire system. That's the kind of movement we at the Center for Political Innovation are trying to build. And it's not easy, it's difficult, but we have people around the country who understand that we are sincere, who understand we're not just trying to be famous on social media, we're trying to build a real community of activists to carry out real operations, to engage in real political education. Our goal is to set up a network of community centers across America that will engage in anti-imperialist education as well as community work, and we believe we will accomplish that goal. We are very excited. We continue to meet great people, and those who understand what's going on in the world and those who can see that real work and real community needs to be built appreciate the Center for Political Innovation. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, thank you so much. Indeed, there is need to share information, especially alternative information, as we are navigating the world with very significant new alliances being created. Now, with you, Penny, let's look at the frameworks that could be put in place to navigate the challenges which have just been highlighted in the previous analysis as we continue to look forward to the agenda of the Sahelian leaders, and how this will actually bring a new face of the African continent in line with international interaction, especially along very diplomatic and strategic lines.
Yes, thank you. I would like to continue what Professor Nubong was saying about the value chain and Africa valuing the resources and investing in their people, because that is what strengthens them as they bring in Russia and China, not as new masters, but as win-win cooperation. You talked about valuing your resources. In Mali, they have a local gold, for their first gold refinery that they are setting up with Russia, but the state will own 62% of it. They have a local development mining fund that just invested $33 million into local communities, electricity, roads, schools, hospitals. The new mining codes in the three countries also include local content laws, so the minerals have to be processed locally, and there also includes tech transfer. So you're seeing that these three countries are valuing their resources and they're valuing their people, and they have national institutes that are overseeing the legality of the mining laws. So it's not just one guy comes to power and all the money's for him. It's under a legal framework. I'd also like to reiterate that this imperialist globalist system is based on a scarcity mindset that you have to get yours while you can. But I've learned from Dr. Wallace Wattles, who's the American New Thought writer, that there's enough resources in the world for everyone that God can use us to create more as the creative method. And so I've seen that. One example is Chef Andre Bayala, the first master chocolatier in Burkina Faso. He moved to Cote d'Ivoire to learn chocolatiering. And then he went to Spain during the Ivorian Civil War, which is another imperialist war where you get Christians and Muslims fighting with each other to keep the country unstable. But he was turned away at Spain after crossing the Strait of Gibraltar, where many of his friends unfortunately lost their lives in the Mediterranean Sea. But when he was encouraged to go back to Burkina Faso, he had a vision of making Burkina Faso a chocolate exporter, and he had seen evidence of cacao being grown in the Lipkaka region, I think I'm pronouncing it right, during colonial times. So he was empowered with that vision and also earning the title of Africa's best chocolatier at the Africa Cup of Chocolate. He started experimenting with cacao, and he opened a bakery that uses local products, that helps local farmers. despite taboos and insults. And his vision of making chocolate a possibility in Burkina Faso and opening a culinary institute is actually helping Burkina Faso and other nations, because in 2023, President Ibrahim Traoré asked, is cacao farming possible in Burkina Faso? And Chef Andre showed him his field, and they launched a project with 350,000 cacao plants. And then in 2026, with 300,000 hectares of cacao plants intercropped with plantains. So not only are you developing cacao, which takes 5 years, but you're also growing plantains every year, hundreds of thousands of tons of plantains to feed the nation. And now Chef Andre teaches producers of cacao in cacao producing countries to set up factories so that they can process and sell their own cacao instead of being put into slavery. And there was a case even in 2025 where Mali brought a case before a U.S. District Court of children being enslaved by American corporations, and the U.S. dismissed the case because the value chains are invisible. There's no accountability. So you see this military junta that's actually fighting for development in the country is being demonized. But now also with Chef Andre Bayala has ordered a cacao processing plant for Burkina Faso, and Burkina Faso will be a chocolate exporter by 2030.
Okay.
So as we use the creative method and help other countries and help other people with the idea that we're serving our nation, not just our own individual riches, that alliance between states and between individuals that want to help each other is what strengthens the value chain. And we have accountability in these three governments where they have a vision of supporting the country. Mali Kura is the new Mali vision, and it goes out to 2063. Burkina Faso has a 5-year economic plan, and so does Niger. So I agree that with Professor, there has to be institutions in place that will maintain accountability, and I see that that is what they are doing in the Alliance of Sahel States, and they are inspiring other countries to follow their lead by aligning with them and helping them to break out of the dominance of the economic system that we call globalism, imperialism, where the corporations run the government instead of the people in the country represented by a government that fights for them.
Absolutely, with the decline of the old base order, we are sure that the plan of the three revolutionary leaders will actually sustain, and of course will bring a new impetus of leadership across Africa. But then that needs political will with you, Alter Mobley. Let's see the place of political will as a tool that Africa needs, and of course even revolutionary leaders need. We know Togo and other countries have presented themselves as friends of the Sahelian state, but then how can this relationship translate into real development to accompany the roadmap of these revolutionary leaders to see a new face of the African continent? Where is the place of the political will, and what is the probability of attaining that soonest?
Well, thank you again, Clarisse, for this forum and to share these kinds of values and ideas. Togo needs to be more than a friend. Togo needs to be a brother country. It needs to be a sister country to the Sahel states. And anyone who comes in contact with Africa and says, I am here to help and I am here to facilitate and help you be a stronger country and a stronger collection of states, they need to be more than friends too. They need to understand we're all part of a human family that is really trying desperately in these days to get beyond the racism that has been endemic, and it's the reason we have balkanization. It was a reason for colonization, and we can't deny those things. We can't throw that in the background and act like it's not there. We do have to overcome the challenge of the specter of racism and its impacts on all of these issues that we're dealing with. Africa is not a child. It's not a collective of your children that you need to nurse and bring along and bring up, whether you're from China or Russia or Europe or from America for that matter. That is not what Africa is. Africa is a mother continent. It is the cradle of civilization. It is where life as we know it, or human life, spawned from and was generated and nurtured. And we need to treat it as such. Treat it like your mother. You know, when I think about something that Professor Ngabella mentioned, he was talking about the various countries and who owns what is in Africa. If we were talking about any other continent on the planet, we would be speaking of it differently. We wouldn't be talking about Russia as, who owns the mineral rights to what's in northwestern Russia or far out in the east there, or China or Manchuria or Hunan or India for that matter. We wouldn't be talking about these countries in the same way we speak of Africa. It's always about what's under the feet of African people that is postured as being most important. There was a recent discovery in Uganda that 14 trillion tons of gold have been discovered in Uganda. And the question shouldn't be how we evaluate that gold. It should be, does that gold belong to Uganda, or does it belong to the African people? Does it belong to all of Africa? Does the gold found in Burkina Faso or Sudan, does it belong to a few regional ideologues, or does it belong to the African people? And we need to treat it the same way as if we were talking about China, or we were talking about Russia or India or America for that matter. How do you get to where you parse out these things and separate them along capitalist lines? I appreciate the efforts of your Center for Political Innovation for the help with Omayele and what he's going through down in Georgia. I really do. I am one of the founding members of the not only the National Black Media Coalition, but also the National Association of Black Journalists. And I am certainly going to look more into your organization so that we can possibly find some alliances and some ways to work. Caleb, I appreciate what you're doing. And I again just want to say that we've got to get away from an idea of viewing Africa as this 54, 56 nation states, because that's exactly how Africa is exploited. We need to reinforce that Africa needs to be one country, one continent. And if we can get Africans to understand the power of the size of their geographic area and what that would mean to all of us around the world, then we're moving closer to a day when we can really say that we've allowed Africa to come to the international table as an equal. It's not going to come to the table as Kenya or as Togo or Ghana or Uganda or South Africa. It's going to come to the table as Africa, like India does or China does, and again, I'm running off these countries, and you have to understand that those are the largest countries in the world. Canada, the United States, Russia, those countries have power because of their size. Brazil. Africa needs to move and graduate back to an understanding that you have strength as long as you can unify as much regional territory or continental territory to make you valuable and make you respectable to the rest of the world. I don't respect you, Nigeria, because you are a corner sliver of the continent. Same thing with Cameroon, or same thing with Senegal, for that matter. You have to understand what you are a collective of and exercise that power. And that's the real meaning of Pan-Africanism. And I hope that we can move in that direction. Thank you.
Indeed, the real meaning of Pan-Africanism, of course, no one will create the future that Africa wants. It's actually the role of African stakeholders to be able to define the Africa we want. And we round off with you, Noah. Of course, looking at how we can attain the Africa we want in a multipolar society with visionary leadership. What are the prospects? You seem to be muted, Noah.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the ending of that question. What was it?
Looking at the prospect of having the Africa we want, of course, seeing the giant bloc, the Sahelian states defeat imperialism in a multipolar context.
Well, I would say that the prospects are quite good. The winds of history are truly on the side of the people of the world and not on the side of the dying Western financial system. And I think that that's become increasingly clear with the sort of brazen desperation that we've seen from the Trump administration recently. Some people might look at the attacks that have been made on Venezuela, the attacks that have been made on the people of Iran, the attacks in Latin America, escalations against the people of Russia and on the African continent. And they may mistake that for strength. The reality of the situation is that is a point of weakness. And likewise, people often talk about, what it is that makes America special. They talk about, our so-called human rights and our freedoms. But the reality of the situation is that many of those freedoms that Americans take for granted, the civil liberties, product of the stability that existed as a result of the tremendous amount of financial stability that happened in the United States as a result of the post-World War II economic expansion. But the reality of the situation is that this system that we've been clinging to is dying. We can't hold on to the system in the same old way. And we see that in the taking away of our civil liberties. We see it, with the jailing of journalists like Julian Assange, or the fact that people like Edward Snowden have to live in exile. We see it with the way that conversations around healthcare were taken during the COVID-19 epidemic, and of course we see it with the treatment of the People's Democratic Uhuru movement, who simply for holding Zoom calls, having like a $20 donation to their PayPal, we're convicted under the we're prosecuted under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, an act that has really not been used since the First or Second World War with any seriousness. That is something that Western powers are really going to have to reckon with. We're told oftentimes that these wars that we're fighting around the world are for human rights, that these countries don't have the freedom that we have here in the West, and that we're bringing freedom to them. When the reality of the situation is that as these countries are breaking free from the Western financial system, as they are growing, as they are developing, forging alliances with each other, turning eastward, and joining with the Belt and Road Initiative, taking advantage of the development projects happening in Eurasia and subsidies that Russia is able to provide. As they're doing this, they are taking away our freedoms, and that is something that is should be of tremendous concern to the American people, which is part of why they've sort of manufactured this atmosphere of pessimism and degeneracy and endless culture and gender war strife that you see on the internet. They really need to keep the people of the world distracted so that they don't see the hope that is on the other side of the world, the hope that is emerging on the African continent, the hope that is emerging in Asia and in Eurasia and in Latin America, and all around the world. The people of the world are breaking free of this Western financial system. And that is something that should be celebrated, and that is something that should really be brought to the American people. And we do our best to do that at the Center for Political Innovation. We distribute hundreds of books for free, and we're really looking forward to really expanding our operations in this next year and really expanding our influence among the American people, because we have a message that they need to hear, and that is that the future of the United States is with the people of the world. It is not with the Wall Street or with the City of London.
Thank you so much. Of course, we've come to the end of the program, but then just 30 second conclusion from you, and we kick off with you, Professor Gabila Nubong. From all that has been said, what do you think can be that advice to AES leaders in line with policy and policy priority, and of course to attain the set goal or the agenda or roadmap presented already?
Well, I think you have a generation of, you have 40, 50 odd years of African post-independence experiences to learn from. You know the mistakes that your counterparts on the other parts of the continent have made. And you're trying something that is very bold, and it's not going to be difficult. The road ahead is going to be extremely difficult. It's not going to be easy, sorry. The road ahead is going to be extremely difficult. Privilege does not give up without a fight. Class does not back off without trying to protect its turf. Exploitation does not develop a good conscience overnight. So the battle continues. This generation of AS leaders are rewriting a new history for Africa. Their mandate and their responsibility is to write the history differently from what their post-independence predecessors have done, by demonstrating commitment to good governance, commitment to the well-being of the people, resilience and resolve in the pursuit of their objectives, ability and the facility to be able to establish the kinds of strategic partnerships that's going to make for the well-being of the people. Is it going to be an easy journey? Definitely no. But they have taken a bold step. We can only wish them well, and as the rest of the African fraternity and our friends around the world continue to provide them the sort of support, moral support, and intellectual and idealistic support that it takes to be able to make the roadmap ahead of them clearer. Their success is going to provide a model for the rest of the African continent that it is possible, it can be done, if we have the right incentive, the right motivation, the right leadership, and the right partnership in place. So they need to look after their people. There's the one thing that, as an African and as one who wishes them well, I would say, make the people first, invest in the people, let the people see that whatever you're doing, it's for their well-being. They will empower the people, they will defend the revolution. Empower the people, they would make for the sustainability of the revolution. Put the interests of the people first in everything that you do, and give them the tools and the resources to carry the vision that you have embarked upon long into the future, and you'll never go wrong with what you're doing. Thanks so much, Clarisse.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Gabila. It's about people-centric leadership. Swiftly with you, Caleb, 30 seconds. Of course, what do you think are the parameters to actually check the risks of involved in this revolution that the leaders have started? We are 2 years and above to be able to stamp out imperialism in the modern context.
Well, I can only speak to our role in the United States, which is a movement is needed now more than ever. The amount of podcasts out there, the amount of social media, the amount of discussion that goes on is great, but it doesn't mean anything if it doesn't lead to action. And we need to build a movement in America of people that understand what's happening on the Union of Sahel States and on the African continent, what's happening around the world, and why the future of America cannot continue to be tied up with the British Empire system and these wars around the world. And that's what our organization is committed to doing. A movement is needed more than anything right now, and we encourage people that are in the United States to get involved, because now more than ever, it's time time to build a network of people who can carry out operations, can educate, can raise awareness, and can build the networks and communities necessary to transition the United States into the new world beyond imperialism.
Indeed, the new world beyond imperialism, people-to-people connection to foster the different phase of international relations. And of course, there is need to keep Africa's flame burning with you, Penny. How can we attain this under the banner of the AS? And of course, as we continue to observe and watch the development across the region, tackling insecurity at the moment?
Thanks. Thank you for the question, but could you clarify your question? I wasn't quite clear what you wanted me to address.
Okay, looking at the concluding phase of your book, it's titled Africa's Flame, and of course there is need to maintain this positive flame, which is revolutionary across the continent, to see that we are looking at it from a different perspective that aligns with the roles of the New World Order.
Okay, so you want me to explain how Africa's Flame, the book that I wrote, and the example of the Sahel states can inspire the rest of the world, is what I understand. I'm finding, as Caleb Maupin said, that we have to build the movement, and as I educate people with my book or with demonstrations. Yesterday, I was out in the streets with my partner, Gary, and we had a Juneteenth celebration with pictures of Hands Off Uhuru and Hands Off Africa, Hands Off Ibrahim Traore. We were all prepared with a little skit to do because we didn't know who would be there. And a Somalian gentleman came up and said, Ibrahim Traore, wow! So he talked for about 10 minutes about all the wonderful things that's going on in the Sahel states. And then another gentleman walked by, and the Somalian man educated him about Traore and about Uhuru and how the FBI went after Uhuru. So I'm seeing that people are excited when they learn about the developments, the economic developments, agricultural and mining and entrepreneurships especially. They're excited about what's happening and the possibility of an actual Pan-African movement. And I see that our support for Uhuru also strengthens the alliance because their fight is our fight. I believe it was Kim Il-sung said that the world is not free until Africa is free. And so we need to get out there and educate people about the wonderful things that are happening in Burkina Faso and the Alliance of Sahel States, because the media doesn't tell them. I have to really search, even on AI engines, to find actual information from Africa. Even when I search for Faso 7 TV, the algorithms want to ignore it. So we have to get past the algorithms and get in the streets and show people what is possible as the Alliance of Sahel States aligns with the multipolar world that is rising in the East. And that's the only hope for America, is that Americans will wake up and understand our enemy is not whatever gender is not our gender that day. It's not the Democrats or the Republicans, it's the international corporations. And the only way to break America free from that British economic system is to join the multipolar world economy in the East, which breaks in Shanghai Cooperation and the Sahel states. So thank you for your time.
Thank you too for honoring this invitation, Penny. Briefly with you, also, Mobley, how can we preserve this agenda that is so practical? It's not just theoretical, but practical in the way that these leaders are actually governing the nations at this juncture, in spite of the challenges, especially security challenges.
Absolutely. Africa needs to understand where it is in all of this. If Africa needs to be free, and that's the number one goal of all of the rest of us and the rest of the world, then Africa needs to understand that as well. Africa has the unfortunate position of having a population whose average age is only 18 years old. Very young population in Africa, and we have educational gaps, but we have information overload, as we all probably feel about that. But I'm a little older. I grew up in the '60s. I know what it's like to come up in a situation where we were always just grab a jacket and an umbrella from being in the street. And that is where we knew we had to always be prepared to go in order to exact justice in this country. And for everyone who understands that in this country, I applaud them. Everyone who understands that that same fight has to be taken to Africa because the enemies are the same. They're just on a different level and on a different side of the ocean. But the tactics that are going to be employed to solve those problems are exactly the same. So keep doing programs like this, and hopefully we can get back together and see how we've done in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely, coming together to also provide the alternative interpretation of international processes and how this can help foster the agenda of the African people and the New World Order. Let's end with you, Noor. Of course, there's need to ensure sustainable sovereignty, economic, political, and even social and cultural sovereignty. What recommendations for the leaders as they continue to champion the fight against imperialism while bringing back the identity of the African people?
Of course, I can't really speak to telling the people of Africa what to do, but I will say that they will stay on the right track if they keep in mind their own sovereignty. If they continue to pivot towards the east, away from France, away from the French colonialists, away from the British imperialists, and that is really what we need to be doing in the United States as well. I guess in this instance, it would be I guess for us a pivot to the west, towards so far west we go past Alaska with the new emerging BRICS economy, and that if Africa is going to be sovereign, that is really what they need to do. They need to keep their security intact and meet the needs of their people, because the greatest resource that the African people have is their people. 1.6 billion people live on the African continent. If that were one country, it would be the most populous country in the world. And we know that human labor power is the essence of all value that is created in this world. There is tremendous mineral wealth and tremendous oil wealth on the African continent. And the people of Africa need to take ownership of that and make use of it to bring peace and prosperity to their people, and to continue to do trade on the basis of equality rather than on the basis of their subjugation to their colonial masters.
Indeed, of course. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Now we've come to the end of the discursive and knowledge sharing program. Thank you for the greater insight. And of course, we want to appreciate the technical team for ensuring that it was a well coordinated program. Thank you all for trusting the Pan-African television. Do have a blissful weekend. Bye-bye.
This program was brought to you by Globus.